All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the more that Memphis tries to force their way into a power conference, the more that they get rejected. As for the second time in the last several years, the Big 12 Conference has told Memphis thanks, but no thanks. This time around, Memphis was offering up more than $200 million in sponsorship deals to the Big 12, along with the school foregoing any conference revenue for at least 5 years. But Memphis's proposal drew little to no interest around the Big 12. Now, some could argue that Memphis is flirting with being a school without a conference right now. Now, no, Memphis is not a football independent, okay? But I said this before a couple of weeks ago. They are clearly languishing in the American Conference, formerly the American Athletic Conference, as that announcement was just made today. Nonetheless, this decade alone, okay, Memphis has sat back and they've watched Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF all leave the American for the Big 12, while they never got an invite, even though that they've been trying. Okay, and clearly the American is not the league that it was when it was formed back in 2013. You go back to that year. Louisville and Rutgers were there for just a year. You knew that was going to be the case following the breakup of the original Big East. Of course, Louisville went to the ACC. Rutgers went to the Big Ten. Okay, but since then, we saw Connecticut back in 2011 simply to say, you know what, screw it. We're going to be a football independent and we're going to put all of our other sports back in the Big East. Okay. And also, let's not forget SMU from this equation because SMU basically did what Memphis is trying to do right now. They basically bought their way into the ACC. And in doing so, they still were able to make the conference title game their first year in that league. Now, I said this before, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm not trying to sound like a broken record here, but Memphis knows that they cannot afford to hang around in the American because if they do, they are simply going to get lost in the shuffle there in more ways than one. So you ask yourself, why don't the big conferences want Memphis? And it's one of those for me, I feel like, these moves for the most part are football oriented, and I don't see the big conferences wanting to deal with Memphis's football program. I've said this before, other people who have commented on previous podcasts have said the same thing, and it's very true. I feel like Memphis would be ideal for the ACC. They could go a long way there basketball wise, first and foremost. It would renew their rivalry with Louisville. Okay, going back to the days of Conference USA, and even before that, I think it was the Great Midwest Conference. I think that was the name of it. Please, if I'm wrong, please forgive me. But nonetheless, I think it would be big for them. But you got to ask yourself, what does Memphis bring football wise to the table? And at the end of the day, a lot of these realignment moves, they're basically based around football. Now, some might feel the Big 12 Conference Commissioner, Brett Yormark, is willing to take any and every school into his league that wants to be there. That's not the case. And it's clearly not the case right now because you can make an argument and say Yormark and the Big 12 can afford to be picky. I mean, you look at it like this, and this is pre Brett Yormark. When the Big 12 was on the verge of going under, that was when Nebraska left, Missouri, and A&M in Colorado originally. Okay, the Big 12 had to get desperate. They brought in TCU, they brought in West Virginia. Then, they were somewhat sailing along, and then when they brought in Yormark saw the need for expansion, and he also needed to find a way to save this league after Texas and Oklahoma made their decision to go to the SEC. So he looked at the markets and he said, "What markets can bring me some value, and what teams can bring me some value, or schools rather?" And he brought in Cincinnati. He brought in Houston. He brought in UCF. He brought in BYU. And I think the Big 12 was okay from there, but Brett Yormark saw an opportunity when the original Pac-12 went under. Okay, and he brought in Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. Now it's a little bit different. You've got 16 schools, and on top of that, you've got 16 mouths to feed. And it's one of those where schools at this point in the bigger conferences, they are really, and I mean really, going to sit back and say, hey, what value do these schools bring in? Because now that is going to be an extra school or schools, plural, that you got to sit up there and divvy up the pie with. So, nonetheless, recently we saw the Big 12 say no to Gonzaga, not because Gonzaga is not a name. It came down to the fact that Gonzaga doesn't have a football program. And if you're the Big 12, you want schools that, yeah, they can be good in basketball, but you want a football program as well. We saw Connecticut try to talk their way into the Big 12 last year. And basically, Brett Yormark was on board with it due to the fact that he's a Northeast guy originally. On top of that, he understands the value that UConn's basketball program brings to the league. But from a football aspect, the Big 12 was going to basically have to do a GoFundMe for UConn to try to get them up to speed for like 7 years down the road just to join the Big 12. So that was a no go. So, nonetheless, to join the league, you're going to need 12 out of 16 of the schools that are there to be on board with the idea. And Memphis didn't even come close to having that support. You also look at the fact of how much do the current television deals have to do with the Big 12 and other leagues looking to expand. For me, Memphis, if they really wanted the Big 12, they might have to sit this thing out and wait possibly to the next round of TV deals coming up for the big leagues. So that's 2030, 2031, 2032. In those years, I right off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly which one for each of those leagues, but that could be a possibility for Memphis, but a lot could change between now and then. Nonetheless, joining a power conference is not as cut and dry as it seems. You might want to be there, but that power conference necessarily might not want you. And I think Memphis is finding out right now what other schools around the country can attest to. Because if you remember when the original Pac 12 was going under, um, Stanford, Cal, they wanted to get into the Big Ten as well. And the Big Ten basically said no. And it's like, from an academic aspect, Stanford and Cal would bring a lot to the table. But again, you would still have two more additional miles to feed. And if you're the Big Ten, you basically got all that you wanted out of the West Coast. You got USC and you got UCLA. And then, of course, you got Oregon and Washington at a discounted rate until they get their fair share somewhere down the road, or their equal share down the road for joining the league. So, nonetheless, what's next for Memphis? Because the new Pac 12, we've seen them court Memphis. And it's one of those where the original deal fell through because Memphis and some of the other schools from the American were basically looking for the Pac 12 to pay their exit fees, which clearly didn't happen. We've heard about the possibility of Memphis joining the Pac 12 as a football only member while joining the Big East in all other sports. Um, that right there is a possibility for Memphis. It's something that we shouldn't gloss over, but you have to ask yourself, is this going to be something that is sustainable long term for Memphis and all parties involved? And I'm going to say no, because at some point, if Memphis dances with the Pac 12 football wise, they're going to want the rest of their sports in that league as well. Um, I think the Big East could possibly welcome Memphis from every other sport except football, of course, but you still might be back to the same problem that did in the original Big East more than a decade ago. You had half of your schools there who were football schools, the other half who were basketball schools. And basically, the basketball schools were like, you know what, we're not here to fix your football problem. The Big East welcomed Connecticut back because remember, Connecticut was an original member of the Big East. On top of that, it's not like UConn left voluntarily. They, along with the rest of the remaining football schools, after Syracuse and Pitt left for the ACC, they were kicked out. Okay, and the basketball schools wanted to get back to focusing on basketball. UConn limped back to the Big East, and of course, it has worked out for them from a basketball perspective. How long is that going to last due to their football program? We simply don't know. Nonetheless, I think Memphis and the Big East, for their other sports, with the exception of football, could work. They would get that Big East money. It would be another stream, if you will, for the Big East as far as a school that could come in and produce at a quality basketball level. You just think about what you would get basketball wise in the Big East: Memphis, Georgetown, St. John's, Villanova, Marquette, Creighton. We can go right down the list there. But nonetheless, I'm not sure if it's going to be sustainable long term. You look at it right now and you ask yourself, what is the best case scenario right now for Memphis? Um, I'm looking at it like this. I still think that Memphis truly has options on the table. Okay. Their failed attempt to SMU their way into the Big 12. Okay. Does something like that give the Pac 12 more leverage to go after Memphis? That's going to be something that you got to keep an eye on right there. And my biggest question is this: if Memphis was willing to put up so much money, granted it was sponsorship, with sponsorship deals, excuse me, to leave the American for the Big 12, why couldn't they have simply just tried to, get the money together and pay their own exit fees to get out of the American to join the Pac-12? That's just a question for me. 5 years from now, though, where are we going to see Memphis athletically? Okay, I'm looking at it like this. I think Memphis needs to just face the facts and accept reality, and that is the fact that right now the ACC or the Big 12 are not going to take you. And if the ACC and the Big 12 ain't going to take you, we know good and doggone well that the SEC and the Big 10 ain't going to do it. I'm just throwing that out there, okay? I am going to circle back to that. But I truly do think that Memphis should look at their best options at the moment. I think for me, and it's not in any exact order, okay, as far as what I think is best for Memphis at this point, you could do the UConn thing as far as being a football independent, and joining a league like the Big East for all of your other sports. And it's one of those things. Sure, you would get some basketball money. Sure, you might take a step back from football, but then at the end of the day, you could write your own ticket and possibly sit back as a free agent, if you would, football wise, and kind of showcase what you can and cannot do. Also, the Pac-12 option, like I said, Big East for all other sports, Pac-12 for football. Or how about just going to the Pac-12 altogether? I know that, before Memphis expressed their concern about traveling cross country, if you would, to compete league wise in all of their other sports, to join up with schools that are in the Pac-12. Of course, you got Texas State now who joined, Boise State, Colorado State, San Diego State, Fresno State, Utah State, Washington State, and Oregon State. It's one of those, like I said before, another reason why I think it fell through as far as Memphis going to the Pac 12 as a full time member. They needed another dance partner in their region to go with them. And I think the best case scenario for that to happen, you'd have to get Tulane along with Memphis full time to join the Pac-12 to kind of cushion that blow if that were to happen. But I'm not sure if that's going to happen immediately, and the reason why is this: we all know about what's going on right now between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, and of course, mediation has come and gone, and there has been no resolution for both of these leagues. So it's going to court, but I don't think it's going to trial because I don't think both sides want all of their dirty laundry put out there in public, especially if more stuff pops up in discovery. Nonetheless, I think Memphis has to sit back and watch this because, like I said last week, the Pac-12 versus Mountain West battle is going to be the next big domino to fall in realignment, and it's going to dictate a lot of things. The Mountain West has already said they are not looking to expand right now, and biggest reason why they are not looking to expand is because of these court proceedings. So you look at it, and you look at the Pac-12 for an example. Their media deal, I think, at the end of the day, is going to be better than what the Mountain West is going to get going forward. That's first and foremost. If the Mountain West doesn't get everything that they were expecting to get out of this thing, are they going to have the money to keep a UNLV and an Air Force happy? Remember, they got bigger slices of the pie to remain there. And if the Mountain West doesn't have that money, are they going to be able to keep an UNLV, and are they going to be able to keep an Air Force? Let's just say, for an example, the Pac 12 gets what they want out of this court battle with the Mountain West. And let's say they have some money to spend. I guarantee you the Pac 12 is going to look at and be the better option for Memphis from this standpoint, especially hypothetically speaking, if somehow the Pac-12 were able to get a UNLV to leave the Mountain West. I know that UNLV signed the grants of rights just like everybody else, but if the Mountain West doesn't have the money to pay them, would UNLV stay? So that's just I'm just throwing it out there from that standpoint. But nonetheless, I think that is going to be the next big domino to fall. And I think that could possibly have a hand in where Memphis is, because at the end of the day, the Pac-12, they've got part of their media deal in place. Not everything, but nonetheless, if you're Memphis, the Pac-12 is going to be able to give you a better media deal than what the American is going to give you. And at the end of the day, Memphis, if they stay in the American, they're just going to be there languishing. So I think they need to try to get creative and find ways out of there. And like I said before, maybe look at and say, hey, maybe we just need ourselves to get this money up for our exit fee, and let's see where we can go from here. Right now, if I'm Memphis, you're back to the drawing board. You've got to figure out your next move. Like I said, maybe it's a football independent. Maybe you join the Big East for all of your sports. Maybe you go full time to the Pac 12. Maybe you go to the Pac 12 as a football only member and do everything else in the Big East. But nonetheless, this is not going to end pretty for them in the American. Like I said before as well, everybody or a lot of schools who are not in those quote unquote power fours, they're looking at the Big 12 as a savior. And that is not a guarantee as well. I don't think the SEC and Big Ten expand to the after this unless they truly have to. The Big Ten has 18 miles to feed. The SEC has 16 miles to feed, and it's like it's one of those where they're going to look at everybody else trying to get in there as far as what value that they're going to bring to the table. I think the same thing can be said for the Big 12, and I think the same thing can be said for the ACC. The ACC, they're trying to keep Clemson and Florida State happy. That's first and foremost. And I think what helped them with that is the fact that SMU, Cal, and Stanford are not getting an equal slice of the pie as of yet. So that's going to allow them to help buffer that situation. And then with the Big 12, they're still trying to see how this 16-team league works out for them long term. So I think Memphis is going to be lost in the shuffle. And unless Memphis can be patient and maybe try to circle back to this thing when the next round of TV deals are up several years down the road, I think they are just going to have to settle for at least being in the Pac 12 as a football only member, or just remaining in the American and being frustrated. That was a huge blow to the ego of Memphis, as they thought they had everything in place to possibly, entice the Big 12 to join up with them. That was not the case. We saw this several years ago when Memphis was trying to get into the Big 12, and they talked about partnerships and sponsorships rather with that league, and of course, all of it was talk to no avail. So if you're Memphis, it's back to the drawing board. They do not have a future in the American. That is the bottom line. It's either going to be, in my opinion, Pac-12 is a football member. Pac-12 is a full-time member. Uh, Big East with everything else, and maybe as a football independent. Well, let's see what's next for the Memphis program, as clearly they don't have a future in the American, and they clearly don't have a future in the Big 12 either. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And for all of you college football fans out there, the start of a new season is right around the corner. With that said, starting to next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the weekend after, I will begin my previews for the upcoming college football season, and that includes my top 25, as well as my conference comp by conference breakdown, as well as my projections for the college football playoff. Also, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And if you give me that follow, that'll be my pleasure to give you that follow right back. And the same can be said for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going around on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.